Who's our host and hostess? There's the host. There's the hostess. Okay.
Sonia Mataji and Sumit Chandra.
Okay. This is my first time coming to your home, right?
I think
Yes. Once before I was here?
Yes. Govinda Prabhu came. I don't remember Maharaj coming.
You'll have a better memory than I about that. Okay. So I see Srimad Bhagavatam on the table over here. I guess that means you're going to begin reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Started 2 days ago. Fantastic. I started 25 years ago. More than 25 years ago, 50 years ago. 50 years ago. You have to catch up. Okay, thank you. "52 years ago. That's a long time. I'll say something about Srimad Bhagavatam at the end. We'll start just going forward with where we left off yesterday. Kapila Dev, Canto 3, Chapter 25, The Glories of Devotional Service. The scene is, according to the language of this earlier parts of this chapter, the strand, that's like the bank, of Bindu Sarovar. Now there's so many Bindu Sarovars in India, so it's not really clear which one, but Bindu Sarovar. Kardama Muni has recently taken his vanaprastha stage of life, meaning he went back to the vana, back to the forest, with the consent of his son, so he could continue his activities of dhyan, because this is Satya Yuga. He was engaged in meditation on Vishnu. And meditation upon Vishnu can be passive, but he was engaged, Kardama Muni, was engaged in devotional service, with his mind fixed upon the personality of Godhead, absorbed in worshiping him from within. That's described in the previous chapter. So he's gone, and now Devahuti, his mother, Kapila Dev's mother, is remembering the words that Lord Brahma spoke. Lord Brahma was the grandfather. The father of Devahuti was Swayambhuva Manu, and Swayambhuva Manu was the son of Lord Brahma. So we're at the very, very beginning stage of creation. The first day in the life of Brahma. And already, by the time Lord Brahma came, there were 9 daughters of marriageable age. Lord Brahma decided, the grandfather decided, these daughters of yours should marry the great sages who would then assist him, Brahma, in filling up the universe with living entities. I mean, not just numbers, but also the sages had the gift, the capacity, the power to produce living entities of many different species with their wives with these 9 daughters. So they're celebrated personalities. And he, Brahma, informed Devahuti that the child within her womb was a male, and not only a male, he's the personality of Godhead. Going back in time, before Devahuti and Muni were married, Muni was a son. This was the practice. Was a practice. Prabhupada writes it's still sometimes a practice. Just like that cousins would marry. So, for example, Arjuna married Subhadra. Subhadra is the sister of Krishna and Balaram. Subhadra was the daughter of Devaki. Subhadra was the daughter of Devaki. Later moved with Balaram and Krishna to Dwarka. Arjun was Krishna's cousin, which means that Subhadra was also Arjun's cousin. And Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavatam, 10th canto, chapter 1, in this section about Krishna's appearance, which is coming up soon. This was a practice. There's some of you from India, you may know there's a rule that some cases it's auspicious, in some cases it's forbidden. Which way it can work that it's auspicious, and which way that it works that's forbidden. I know a very nice devotee couple from South India, from Tamil Nadu, and they're cousins, and their husband and wife. And I said, your cousins? He said, it's the auspicious kind, and gave some explanation that I couldn't follow. So, similarly, Muni is a son of Brahma, and Muni married the daughter of another son of Brahma. Devahuti was the son of Swayambhuva Manu, who was also a son of Lord Brahma. So, these daughters of Muni and Swayambhuva, of Devahuti and Muni, married some of Muni's brothers, who were also sages, rishis. Any case, that's a detail. She's now remembering the words of Lord Brahma, that this child that you're carrying in your womb, not just your son, he's the personality of Godhead, take good care of him. So she did. And now he's taking good care of her because the father is gone and the elder son is looking after his mother. So his mother approaches him with great distress due to what she considers to be excessive attachment to her now departed husband. And she's feeling torn inside. And she's characterizing her attachment as being material. Now, we had some discussion yesterday evening. When a great soul departs this world, then naturally there's feelings. It's not that one is to become, a transcendentalist becomes numb and has no feelings. There's feelings, but those feelings, for a great soul, that's the loss of the association of the great soul, not something that's on the material side. But she's characterizing her feelings as being on the material side, her humility. And the direct direction of the question she's going to be asking is how to overcome undue attachment on the material side of life. So let's hear what she has to say. Text number 9, chapter 25. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. the origin and supreme Lord of all living entities. You have arisen to disseminate the rays of the sun in order to dissipate the darkness of ignorance of the universe. And Srila Prabhupada's purport. Kapila Muni is accepted as an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. Here the word Adya means the origin of all living entities. Purusham Ishvara means the Lord or Ishvara of all living entities. Ishvara Parama Krishna. Kapila is the direct expansion of Krishna, who is the sun of S-U-N, the sun of spiritual knowledge. As the sun dissipates the darkness of the universe, so when the light of the Supreme Personality Godhead comes down, it at once dissipates the darkness of Maya. We have our eyes, but without the light of the sun, our eyes are of no value. Similarly, without the light of the Supreme Lord, or without the divine grace of the spiritual master, one cannot see things as they are. So she's asking for mercy. So now comes her appeal. Text 10. Now be pleased, my Lord. It's her son, but she's addressing her son as my Lord, because she knows he's the Supreme Lord. Be pleased to dispel my great delusion. Due to my feeling of false ego, I have engaged by your Maya and have identified myself with the body and consequent bodily relations. Purport. The false ego of identifying one's body as oneself and of claiming things possessed in relationship with the body is called Maya. In Bhagavad Gita 15th chapter, the Lord says, I am sitting in everyone's heart, and from me come everyone's remembrance and forgetfulness, unquote. Devahuti had stated that false identification of the body with the self and attachment for the possessions in relation to the body are also under the direction of the Lord. Does this mean that the Lord discriminates by engaging one in his devotional service and another in sense gratification? If that were true, it would be an incongruity on the part of the Supreme Lord, but that is not the actual fact. As soon as the living entity forgets his real constitutional position of eternal servitorship to the Lord and wants instead to enjoy himself by sense gratification, he is captured by Maya. The capture by Maya is the consciousness of false identification with the body and attachment for the possessions of the body. These are the activities of Maya. Since Maya is also an agent of the Lord, it is indirectly the action of the Lord. The Lord is merciful. If anyone wants to forget him and enjoy this material world, he gives him full facility, not directly, but through the agency of his material potency. Therefore, since the material potency is the Lord's energy, indirectly it is the Lord who gives the facility to forget him. We discussed this in the morning Bhagavatam class. The same principle. Krishna has nothing to do. Krishna creates, but he's the non-doer. Things are done through the agency of his potencies. We discussed this morning. If we want to do something, we have to do some work. Krishna doesn't have to do any work. All he does is he just desires. He doesn't even have to say anything. Like, can you build the universe, Lord Brahma? He didn't have to say it. He just desires. And the potencies of the Lord start to act, because Icha Shakti, the Lord's desire potency, is so potent, the other potencies are sub-potencies, and they do what Icha of the Lord wants. And if he says stop, then they stop. So the material energy is one of his energies that's enacted because the desire of the living entity to be forgetful. So let's do it again. Supersoul is situated in the heart. Sarvasya Chahamriti Sanivishto. He's situated in the heart of every living entity. And through the supersoul's sub-potencies, Maya Jakshena Prakriti, he oversees, Paramatma oversees, he doesn't directly contact material nature, but he oversees material nature, Upadrashta, and he permits, Anumanta. And so in that way, he's in charge of the material energy. Maya Jakshena Prakriti. For all Suyate Sacharacharam, the moving and the non-moving beings, he's in charge. He's the Lord. He is in charge. But he doesn't do anything other than he sees and he permits. And then his sub-potencies do everything. And according to the indication of the Lord, the sub-potencies do what they do, and they bewilder. So in this way, Supersoul is the source of forgetfulness, or Supersoul is the source of remembrance. And everything depends upon whether we want to look at him or forget him, or have our consciousness directed towards him or consciousness directed away from him. And if the conscious desire is directed away from him, then he has a potency called Maya, Shakti. She'll do her thing. She'll cover the living entity because they wanted to forget him. And so he's in charge of that forgetfulness. And he's also in charge of remembrance. It's called Sambandha again. It's a science, a spiritual science, of how everything happens. Just sharing. I mentioned this in the morning class. So I said I would send to Radha Krishna the texts from Vedanta Sutra in which Vyasadeva is addressing deviant philosophies that Vyasadeva, defeats in Vedanta Sutra, of misunderstandings of what the source of everything is. And there's categories and there's subcategories of those categories specific to Buddhism, because that's what we talked about this morning. The sutras and Baladev Vidyaprasad's commentary take about 12 pages. And it's really complex. It's something like, I don't know anything about computer science, but it's something like computer science. To me, it's gobbledygook, computer science. Some people, they know what computer science is, and it's not, they understand what it is. And there are people that are students of the Vedas, and they can understand what Sambandha Gyan is, in misunderstandings and misinterpretations. The wrong understanding of how everything comes, because that's the first aphorism of Vedanta Sutra, right? Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Inquire into the nature of that which is the source of everything, the absolute truth. So there are different ideas of what's the absolute truth. That was the verse this morning. Krishna is saying to Uddhava, different persons have different ideas of who I am. Some say this, some say that, some say the other thing. And in Vedanta Sutra, Vyasadeva knew before it even happened that Buddhists would say different things. It's a detail, but there are 4 principal students of Buddha, and there are 4 schools of Buddhism that each emphasize something different. And the emphasis had everything to do with what's the source of everything. And therefore it's in Vedanta Sutra. And Baladev Vidyabhusan took those little sutras and expanded each of those little sutras into the 4 divisions of the followers of Buddhism that taught something different than Vedanta. They have another idea and another idea and another idea and another idea of how everything came into being, according to this branch of Buddhism. So I'm mentioning this because it's just got triggered from the purport. When you're captured by, where does Maya come from? Because the discussion here is Krishna not Super Soul, the Supreme Lord, not being partial. Some people engages in knowing, and some people engages in being covered. So that seems like it's capricious, it's whimsical. Why? And the answer is no, it's not. He's just reciprocating with the desires of the living entity, and some living entities want to have nothing to do with the Lord, and some living entities want everything to do with the Lord. He's at the center. So he gives facilities to both. He's not to blame. The living entities' desire and regard for the Supreme Lord, that's the trigger, or that's the cause, and then there's the effect. And Krishna is reciprocating with the desire. So he remotely he's doing these things. Through the agency of his potencies, in a secondary way he's doing these things. But without his consent, his potencies don't do anything. With his consent, they do everything. So it's nice. This is philosophy, but for the philosophy, there's immediate cause, there's instrumental cause, and there's the remote cause. And the Lord is the remote cause. You want a philosophy discussion? Maybe not. The classic example is making pots. To make pots, you need clay. That's the material cause. And you need a potter's wheel. That's the instrumental cause. And then you need the potter. So the potter's wheel and the instruments sometimes used to shape the pot and this and that, those are the instrumental cause, upadan maya. And then there's nimitta maya. Excuse me, it's the other way. Nimitta maya is the instrumental cause. Upadan maya is the clay. Now where'd the clay come from and where'd the wheel for the potter come from? You know, the comparison is limited because where do those things come from? Because like where does everything come from? But in the manifestation of pots, or the manifestation of houses, or the manifestation of trees, or the manifestation of species of life, and the manifestations of things, there's cause, and there's a material, and there's a remote cause. So Krishna is the remote cause, or the cause of all causes, and those other causes, they're effects of the original cause. It's remote control, but there's control. It's like a drone, but there's the operator of the drone. Remember in Mayapur, there was a ceremony for placing a chakra on top of one of the domes of the Temple of Vedic Planetarium. And because we couldn't see all of what was going on, there was a drone that could, and somebody was moving the drone. The drone had a camera, and the camera was taking a picture as a person was climbing up the top of the dome and putting the chakra on the top of the dome and showing it to all the participants on this giant screen. I mean, really a giant screen. I was really happy to see that technology worked in India, because often it doesn't. And then I looked up, and there's the drone. And it's just like a little camera on this little drone, and somebody's moving. So the drone doesn't do its thing without somebody with the controls. Then you can take it a step back. Where the controls come from, where the intelligence, where the person that's operating the drone come from. Where does everything come from? What's the cause of all causes? So it's a little bit of what's the discussion here. Devahuti is asking, please remove my Maya. I understand it's your Maya. Since it's your Maya, can you please take it away? Because I don't feel comfortable with being covered by Maya. And the Maya that she's saying, she's an elevated person, but she's speaking like Arjuna is speaking, as if covered by Maya. It's your Maya, please remove it. Because this Maya is causing me undue attachment to the temporary. And because of that undue attachment to the temporary, I'm suffering. Because part of that thing I'm attached to isn't around anymore. You're around, my son, but my husband isn't around anymore. Because of my false ego identification, I'm in too much distress. But that's due to Maya, so please remove your Maya. Since the material potency is the Lord's energy, indirectly it is the Lord who gives the facility to forget him. Devahuti therefore said, my engagement in sense gratification was due also to you. Now kindly get me free from this entanglement. There's a nice description, example of this in the Bhagavatam, 10th canto. I just finished discussing this with the Chinese devotees. Prior to the Rajasuya sacrifice, everyone from Mahabharata, you know the Rajasuya sacrifice, right? Rajasuya sacrifice was done to establish King Yudhisthira as the emperor. And prior to the Rajasuya sacrifice, there's a procedure. So Krishna went all the way from Dwarka at the invitation of Yudhisthira, and he stayed in Indraprastha for 4 months. At the end of the 4 months, Yudhisthira suggested now is the time to begin the arrangements for the Rajasuya sacrifice. So the 4 brothers were sent in the 4 directions to extract taxes from all the kings, either A or B. Pay your tax, which means you accept the sovereignty of the emperor, or B, engage in battle and we'll take it by military force. So the 4 brothers went in the 4 directions. We don't hear so much about Nakula and Sahadeva, but in Mahabharata, there's a fair amount of discussion about, they were actually pretty powerful warriors too. And they all came back with one exception of having all kings accept. It was interesting. Even Duryodhana, even Shalva were very inimical to Krishna and the Pandavas. They gave their tax. It says in Mahabharata that Duryodhana accepted that Yudhishthira was a qualified person and virtuous, so he gave his tax. But Krishna had given a little message to Bhima, because Bhima went east from Indraprastha. East is Bihar, and the kingdom of Jarasandha was in Bihar. And he said, don't engage with Jarasandha, because he had a plan. So when they came back, everyone reported, we have all the taxes, which means they had the financial means and everything for conducting the Rajasuya sacrifice. However, it's a rule that all kings must. So that left, there has to be some way of dealing with Jarasandha. And there was a concern when Narada Muni went to Dwarka to request Krishna to come and preside over the Rajasuya Yajna. Another messenger came at the same time in the Sudharma Assembly Hall, representing 20,800 kings who had been put in jail by Jarasandha, with the plan that he was going to make a mass human sacrifice of all those kings to Lord Shiva, Mahabhairava, a form of Lord Shiva. So they sent a messenger pleading to Krishna, please rescue us. So after Jarasandha was defeated, there's a whole section on how that happened. Then Krishna went to free the kings. And the kings looked like prisoners. They were skinny and tattered clothes, and their effulgence was gone and scrawny and emaciated. They weren't treated nicely. And when they offered prayers to Krishna, they saw Krishna in a certain form. We discussed this. They saw a form that's an expansion of Vasudeva Krishna in Dwarka, a Leela expansion. And the description of the form that they saw, etc., etc., and then they offered their prayers. And all this is to say, when they offered their prayers, they started by saying, actually, we don't hold anything against Jarasandha for imprisoning us, because we understand it was you. Because it was our desire to be powerful kings. And you were very kind. Through your illusory potency, you had given us that power and opulence and position, and it was you who took it away, not Jarasandha. And why did you take it away from us? Because we were infatuated with the power and opulence and the position of being a king. And you were very kind, you took it all away. And instead you've given yourself. And they placed 20,800 kings, one by one, placed their feet at the head at the feet of Krishna. They became completely purified of all material desire. They were ready for anything that Krishna wanted. So what Krishna wanted was to take away their infatuation for material desire and give them his mercy. And they knew it. They could understand it. You know, most people don't understand when stuff like that happens. It's like, why do bad things happen to good people? You know that one. But they didn't have that complaint. They weren't whining and complaining. They weren't even blaming Jarasandha. They weren't blaming Krishna or blaming God. Prabhupada tells the story He had a German godbrother. There was a German professor who came to India because he had been studying the Vedas in Germany, so he wanted to go to India to explore Vedic India. And when he visited many temples, he came to the conclusion that Krishna is God, because all the other deities, they're doing something. Durga's doing something, and Lord Shiva's doing something, and this one's doing something. And so, but Krishna's just playing his flute. He doesn't have to do anything. He's God. Anyway, Krishna didn't have to do anything. It was through the agency of his potencies that they were made kings, and there was through the agency, the instrument was Jarasandha, but they then were relieved of their position as kings. So then what did Krishna do? After relieving them from the position of kings, he gave them back their position of kings. But without the false ego of thinking, my kingdom, my power, my opulence. They resumed their position as kings, but now as pure devotees. And he said, as I have protected you, you should also protect your citizens. As I have given you bhakti, you should give bhakti to your citizens. Go back to your kingdoms and rule in that way. And when it comes time for the Rajasuya Yajna, please come and attend. And they did, because that came afterwards. So I'm narrating that because it's just in Krishna's pastimes an example of what is in this purport, or what is being expressed by Devahuti. Things happen by the agency of Krishna's potencies, whether it's remembrance or forgetfulness. And it has everything to do with the attitude or the regard of the living entity towards the source of everything. And most people don't have a clue what the source of everything is, because they don't have proper teachings and proper teachers, and therefore Srimad Bhagavatam. So we have proper teachers and proper teachings, and we can know what's the source of everything. And when as that becomes clearer, then we can have all kinds of opulence or not have the opulence, and we're perfectly fine, because the contentment is our relationship with the source of everything. That's how you remain calm and peaceful, is you know who you are. And if you don't know who you are, it's scary. It's a roller coaster ride. And some people like roller coaster rides. They pay to go on a roller coaster. And then do it again and do it again. But if one doesn't, the impermanence of material happiness, the nature of asat, is it's all impermanent. So Devahuti is saying, I become attached to asat, to my agency of false ego. But that attachment to asat, that's maya. It's your maya. Please remove it. I know it's in your power to do so. I'm making that request. And here's a nice teaching. Kapila could just go, snap his fingers. He didn't even have to snap his fingers. He just it's withdrawn. It's the same thing is said in relation to the Dhruva Maharaj story. You familiar with the Dhruva Maharaj story? Dhruva Maharaj? It's the next canto, it's Canto 4. Young boy who was insulted by his stepmother. He went off to the forest to look for Vishnu. Narada came. Narada gave him the means to get Vishnu. In 6 months, he realized Vishnu. And he went back and he became the king. You know that story? A little bit. So, Narada had the power. Narada had the power to bestow upon Dhruva everything. But instead of giving him, touch him with a magic wand, and now he has everything, he gave him the means of purification so he could achieve what he wanted. And that's the function of a teacher, like the function of a parent. You don't have to micromanage your kids. You have to be good examples, and because the free will of that child or free will of us is going to be operating anyways. So you can't just make your child or make somebody else, do good stuff. Some training is required. Same thing happened with the kings. The kings said, when we go back to our kingdom, this is, to Krishna, the 20,000 kings. When we go back to our kingdom, it'll be very easy for us to get attached again. So please give us the means whereby we can always remember you. They didn't ask for constant remembrance. They asked for the means whereby we can always remember you. It's important. So that's what Devahuti is asking. The means whereby your Maya, which you have covered me by, can become freed. And I wanted it, so now I have it. Now, please give me the means to overcome this potency of yours, the Maya potency. Second paragraph. By the grace of the Lord, one is allowed to enjoy this material world, but when one is disgusted with material enjoyment and is frustrated, and when one sincerely surrenders to the lotus feet of the Lord, then the Lord is so kind that he frees one from entanglement. Krishna says, therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, quote, first of all, surrender, and then I will take charge of you and free you from all reactions of sinful activities, unquote. Sinful activities are those activities performed in forgetfulness of our relationship with the Lord. In this material world, activities for material enjoyment, which are considered to be pious, are also sinful. Contradiction, right? With that definition. Is it for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord? Or is it for the purpose of getting an upgrade in my facilities for Janma, Aishvara, and Shruta and Shri? I get pious merit and get some wealth and get good birth and get elevation to a heavenly planet, get beauty. What's the part of Houston where NASA is? What's that called? Huh? It's in south direction. What's the name of the area? Clear Lake. First time I went to a program in Clear Lake, in the car ride on the way there, I forget who it was who was driving, that in Clear Lake, the people who are going to be at this program are largely employees of NASA. Mostly they're PhD fellows, and they have, high education, and, they have the fruits of their material piety in full blossom. So that was just so I would know the audience. So when I was sitting in the room, opulent home, a lot of highly educated people, luminaries in the room, I said, I'm gonna make a statement. Let me finish the statement before you respond. But it's a question, and so it's true or false, yes or no. The purpose of the Vedas is to engage in activities that are pious, and through engaging in activities that are pious, in this life one will enjoy the fruits of piety, and in the next life one will go to the heavenly realm. And that's the purpose of the Vedas. How many of you here would agree with that statement, true or false? True. And I said, it's what you just agreed on is exactly what Krishna said, that most people understand that's the purpose of the Vedas. So you're in the majority. And you just verified what Krishna said. But when Krishna says right after that, is that's not the purpose of the Vedas. The purpose of the Vedas is not all of those nice things. And the purpose of the Vedas is to know Krishna. The purpose of things that are to be done, or kriti, pious, they bring kriti. You do dharma and you get dharma credits. You get piety. Jarasandha, he was well known for giving charity to Brahmins. He wouldn't say no to a Brahmin. It's like a very interesting discussion. When Bhima, big powerful Bhima, dressed like a Brahmin, this isn't a Brahmin. Look at those shoulders. Look at those arms. He's massive. So when Bhima, Krishna, and Arjuna came before Jarasandha dressed as Brahmins, it was Uddhava's plan, because Uddhava said he will not decline a request from a Brahmana for charity. The charity they wanted was that he would engage in battle with one of them. So he was considering, these aren't Brahmins, but they're coming in disguise as Brahmins, so I'm obliged. And even if they ask me for my son, or my kingdom, or anything, I would give it, because that's the value that I live by. Now, he was a demon. So why did he have that? What was the purpose behind that value that he held? Because he would get pious credit. With that pious credit, he could defeat everybody. He would become more powerful. That was his sankalpa. Get wealth, get power, get strength, get dominance. Misuse. So it's duskriti. Not sukriti, but duskriti. The purpose of the Vedas is not sukriti or duskriti. The purpose of the Vedas is to know Krishna. So when you do you do dharmic things, what's the purpose? It's to please Krishna. That's the purpose of the Vedas. But there are some people that they don't want that. They specifically don't want that. They want to enjoy. And so there's kriti, or there's dharma, for getting things that you want and avoiding the things you don't want. The purpose of those, why that's there, is by honoring the Vedas, it elevates one in the modes of nature, more towards goodness. And when goodness becomes more illumined, then capacity for knowledge is more illumined. And when there's knowledge, then one can look for, who am I really? And the source of myself and material creation, the source of everything. Then devotional service. That's what's coming up in Kapila Dev's teachings to Devahuti. So I just have to finish the paragraph and we're done for this evening. In this world, in this material world, activities for material enjoyment, which are considered to be pious, like Jarasandha's giving in charity to Brahmanas, that's pious. In the material world, where is it? Activities for material enjoyment which are considered to be pious are sinful. For example, one sometimes gives something in charity to a needy person with a view of getting back the money 4 times increased. It's good investment. Good investment. Get back 4 times what you invest. That's a good investment. I'm into it. Giving with the purpose of gaining something is called charity in the mode of passion. Everything done here is done in the modes of material nature, and therefore all activities but service to the Lord are sinful. That's like a strong statement. Because of sinful activities, we become attracted by the illusion of material attachment, and we think, quote, I am this body. I think of the body as myself, and of bodily possessions as mine. Devahuti requested Lord Kapila to free her from that entanglement of false identification and false possession. That's very fundamental. This is just the beginning chapter. It goes on for many chapters. Very detailed explanations. Because from his answers come further questions and so forth. There's value, although it's a little involved. It's value in understanding the relationship of all things with the source. It's called Sambandha, the relationship. It's a Hindi word, right? Sambandha. The relationship of all things with the source, because then it gives us a clue or direction. We're part of that which comes from the source, and how are things that come from the source to be engaged with the source. If you don't have that understanding, then it's up for grabs. Things that you see around you, things of this world, if you don't understand who is the proprietor, it's up for grabs. And one nation thinks it's mine, and another nation thinks, no, it's mine. And you get wars. Well, like this war that's going on. Back in history, this part of the world was part of that part of the world, or that part of the world was part of this. So now we're doing war to get it back the way it was. What's it? What's all that? It didn't belong to either. And until that understanding is reached, there'll always be conflict. And it's on big scale and small scale and interpersonal scale, and even between friends, even between family members. It can be all kinds of interactions where people are thinking I and mine. And then there's clash because their interests don't match. So Sambandha again is important. Although it's a little arduous, it's important to understand what's the source of everything and how does all this work. If you don't understand everything about the source of everything and how it works, if one is not so analytically oriented, it's quite okay. It's quite okay. At least the fundamentals should be understood. There is a source of everything. And that since we are part of that, we're part of the whole, the part is meant to serve the whole. Quite simple. Really quite simple. Prabhupada gives the example. Here's my finger. My finger, my dear finger, can you please scratch? I got a little itch over here. Okay. The part is meant to serve the whole. And if the part doesn't serve the whole, then it's dysfunctional. Or it's a diseased condition, not working properly. And working properly is the part serves the whole. And there's different parts of the body. There's the arms, head, belly, and legs division of the body, and they're meant to serve the whole. There's social divisions, similarly. Anyway, so each of us has something that's an ability. That was in this morning's class. Different species even in the purport. Okay. Different species have some abilities. Dogs can smell things that humans can't smell. Vultures can see things at a distance that humans can't see, and so forth and so on. So the working together is a human ability, and not working together is a human problem. If there isn't a spiritual conception of what's the source of everything and how does everything work together to satisfy the source. It's very practical. Minus it is a directionless society that's gets deteriorated further and further and further as Kali Yuga progresses. So what's the cure? Supposing you're Vyasadeva, or let's not suppose you're Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva is Trikalagyan. He looked into the future. Now we're speaking about the Bhagavatam. Vyasadeva looked into the future and saw, because it was towards the end of Dwapara Yuga, so he looked into Kali Yuga, and what he saw was, yikes, what a mess. And he describes, Manda samanda matayo, manda bhagya yupadrita. Very bad situation. So what to do? You see it's a bad situation, and you're a compassionate person. You got to do something. So he was a literary person, so what did he do? He took the Vedas and put them in writing, because people in Kali Yuga have short memories. And he taught it to his son. And he had his son teach it to Maharaj Pariksit. Now we have Srimad Bhagavatam. It's light in this dark age of Kali. So now you have the light of the Bhagavat in your home. See if there's some discussion. And we're going to have a little arti when we finish our discussion here. How are we doing? 20 minutes to 8. Yes. Here comes the microphone. Yes, speak. You're good.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
I can hear you. Just speak into the microphone. Can you speak into the microphone?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, occasionally it is a question asked. You were talking about the purpose of Vedas. So during our Bhakti Viksha programs, I'm like clearly part of the town.
Okay.
And the program you were referring is that was at our home that time.
That was at your home?
Yes.
No.
Is
it your home?
Yes, this was
Really?
a couple of years back.
More than a couple of years back. The first time I went to Clear Lake was more than couple of years back. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's a question often asked, like even in about Bhakti Viksha programs, like we are having like remotely Zoom Bhakti Viksha.
Okay.
So the purpose of Vedas, which you were discussing a few minutes back. And so the question is, if we are happy, if we are satisfied, and so why, like, we often use the word like this lifetime, previous lifetime, several lifetimes. So it's hard to like some of the like attendees, devotees, they say like, have you seen the previous lifetime or future lifetime? Why not to just focus on the current lifetime? Why you and ISKCON often bring up, okay, this is a previous lifetime pious activities or bad activities. So my question is how to like satisfactorily answer such questions, like lifetime questions and the purpose of Vedas. And they say like it's too much, like we are not here to do PhDs in Vedas. That's when we talk about Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, as long as we are doing fine and we are not doing any wrongful things, we are okay. So how to like handle such questions?
Okay, you just threw like 3 or 5 balls at me, and I can catch one at a time. So it sounds like the prominent one you want to know is
the purpose of Vedas and this lifetime is stuff.
Well, the purpose of the Vedas is the purpose of life. Now, what's the purpose of life? Prahlad Maharaj, When speaking to his father wants to know what's the best thing that you've learned. And he says, persons who are too much attached like you are aren't going to be able to understand the purpose of life. Na te vidu svartakatim hi Vishnu, darashaye bahir artamaninas. So persons who are too much attached aren't going to understand the purpose of the Vedas because they don't understand the purpose of life. So what's the purpose of life? The Vedas is to help fulfill the purpose of life. What's the purpose of life? What's the purpose of the human form of life? Because the other forms of life are by evolutionary methods coming to the human form. Now, what's the big deal? What's special? What's unique? What's the facility of the human form of life? And it's to realize who you are. Now, if the argument is, look, if you're having a good time, reasonably comfortable, whatever's back there, caught the fruit of it, okay. I'm having a reasonably good time. I don't need to know who I am. I just, don't do bad stuff and do good stuff and live a nice life. Why do I have to know who I am? Then that's missing the purpose of human life. Well, so they may not agree, but that's the Vedic conclusion. The purpose of life is to know who you are. And now, what does that mean? That's a good question. So it starts with ABC, then it goes through the whole alphabet. ABC is we're spiritual entities, parts of the supreme entity, and that part is meant to serve the whole. So who we are is Sheshatvam. We're entities that are meant for service to the supreme. Harir Dasya, that's who we are. And so you want to know, my friends, how you answer a question like that depends on the audience. But I'm giving an answer that, that if not knowing the audience. But the purpose is to know who you are. And there's value in, you want to know what happens if you don't know who you are? You have good intentions and you do things that are detrimental because you don't know who you are. You don't know what's in your self-interest. People like to do things that are in the self-interest, but they have a misunderstanding what the self is. If the self is the body, then having a good time and doing pious and don't doing bad things, that's the purpose. But supposing you're not the body, you're a spirit soul that's rotating from one life to the next. So you're in a nice family right now. What's the next one going to be? Can you say for sure? Well, yeah, you just do good things and I'll get a good one next time. You sure? Do you make mistakes? And are you not responsible for mistakes? Well, anyway, so depends on the person how to answer. But to know who you are is pretty simple for persons who are thoughtful. Because if you don't know who you are, you're going to do foolish things, and you're responsible for foolish things. Although your intentions are good, your nature is good, you're not a bad person, and you're trying to do good things, but you do good things that are hurtful. Try to persuade, for example, I don't know how many of these people that you're interacting with are vegetarian, but try to speak to some person that's not a vegetarian, that's not good to eat meat. That's sub-religious. But if they have the reason behind why it's okay. Anyway, so how do you realign somebody to understand who they really are? That's your question. It depends on the person, how you can realign them. And everybody has a different idea of what's good. And the by and large, the standard of what's good keeps changing. And Kali Yuga is progressing, and the standard is going down, the standard is going, that which was previously like unthinkable is now the norm. And wait a while, and it keeps going down and down and down. It's the nature of the advancement of this age of Kali. So it's important to know who you are and what's what. Not just, be a good person and don't do hurtful things and live a good life. It's a little bit like what Damodar Sharn was saying is his roommate in college, in med school. He's an an explicit agnostic fellow. Good, he's vegetarian, but he doesn't believe that he needs to have a belief. He doesn't disbelieve, but doesn't believe that he needs a belief. Like, what's the value in having an orientation towards that which is the source of everything? Why is, it's not important. Just be good. Have virtue. Some years ago, probably 20 years ago, I was visiting a home in Oxford, Mississippi. I was in Oxford, Mississippi because one of our devotees had a father who was a double PhD professor at Ole Miss. Nice place. And one of his friends was a South Indian man, K.P. Sridharan, and his wife, Bhama. And they had a son who was 15, who was the graduating as the valedictorian of his class in the whole state of Mississippi, heading to Washington, D.C. after my visit to get an award for being the valedictorian of his graduating class in the whole state when he was just a teenager. That's like 15. He was brilliant. And now he's an astrophysicist, graduate from Stanford. So, brilliant young man. So he asked me the same question as your friend. Like, why are you a theist? Why don't you just be honest and say you don't know? And so, but instead of saying you believe in God, just say you don't know. And but instead you do things that are good. Why isn't that your conviction? So I asked my mom and dad how to answer that question, and they said, Swamiji's coming, you can ask him. So here's what I said. It depends on the audience, how you answer a question like this. I said, because standards of what's to be done, what's not to be done, is ever changing. And it's going down because of the age of Kali. And I said, for example, one of our devotees in New York is with the Board of Education. They're very, very, they were, at that time, they were in charge of all the guidance counseling departments of every public school in the city of New York. How'd you like that job? And so the Board of Education, they were having a meeting, they were having a joke. They were saying, 5 years ago, what you had to do, what was the disciplinary principle for getting kicked out of class was any one of three things. You talked out of turn, you're kicked out of class. You throw a spitwad. You know what a spitwad is? Some paper and you put it in your mouth and it gets soft and you throw it and it sticks to whenever it hits. That's a spitwad. You throw a spitwad in the room, you get kicked out of class. And you talk back to the teacher, you get kicked out of class. That was some years before. Now, if you carry a concealed weapon, you're kicked out of class. If you threaten the life of the teacher, you're kicked out of class, sent to the principal. And if you physically have an altercation with another student, you're kicked out of class, sent to the principal. And, then keep going. It goes down, it goes down. And so what's to be done, what's not to be done is ever changing because there's no standard. It's not just for convenience we say there's God, but it's fact. Dharmam hi sakshat bhagavat pranyatam, that's standard, and it doesn't change with time. The cultural features of things people may dress differently and so forth, but principles don't change if it's God-given. And that's for the upliftment of society. God gives things to help bring people to realize who they are. And if you don't have that, it's degradation, guaranteed. It doesn't have to be just an atheistic. It can just be agnostic. Just be good. Guaranteed goes down. So even if you want a good life, be theist. And the theist means, what does God want of you? He wants you to be happy. And if you don't know who you are, how can you be happy? You're like a madman. You don't know who you are, trying to be happy. You're not going to be happy. He wants you to be happy. So he wants you to know who you are. And so that you read Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam to revive the consciousness of who we really are when we've forgotten. So again, it depends on the audience, how you respond. And chances are, if someone that's attached to whatever, they're not easy. It's not so easy for them to let go what they're attached to. So one of the best things you can do is be a good example of someone who knows who they are, and you speak like that, and you conduct yourself like that, and that's your character and your quality. That's more compelling than anything you can say or do. Is the compelling nature of your character, and be consistent with it. Yes, you've been very patient. I've been blabbering for...
Thank you. Prabhuji, I just wanted to say thank you to you for coming here and enlightening us, because I brought this Bhagavad Gita from India, and I've been here for almost, I think, 30 years, but never read this book.
Speak more directly into the microphone. Thank you.
I did try a few times to read the book, but I did not. Unfortunately, I would say, but today is the day that I have learned that what is the value of this book, and I wish I would have known that the purpose of life is in this book. And
yes.
Thank you for giving us this message, and I think from today on, I will read this book. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. I'm happy that you're feeling like that.
Namaskar, Swamiji. I'm just hearing the purpose of life is to know yourself. But that being said, when people come in the gatherings like this, they listen to a person, scholar like yourself, their mind is changed for that particular minute.
And then
Next morning when they go back, in order for them to find out what life is all about, they have to follow the directions. When they're born, they follow the direction of their parents. When they grow up, then they're following the direction, going to temples, reading these Vedas, because these have things written in the past which God or people like yourself had added in. But question is, knowing all these facts, why every single time people disconnect and do not take this path as permanent path?
Very simple answer is we're not attached to suffering, but we're attached to the sources of suffering. Because we're attached. We're attached to the sources of suffering. We're attached to the position of trying to be an enjoyer separately from the Supreme. That's this material world. We're here because of the desire to enjoy separately from the Supreme. say it negatively. If we didn't have that desire, we wouldn't be here. So there may be some little light that goes on from reading and so it's this and that, and then we're attached to the temporary and trying to be the enjoyer of it. It's because if we don't have that, we don't have anything, what one may think, if they think about it seriously. But otherwise, they're not even thinking about it seriously. They're just attached. So that's the obstacle. Here's another nice way of saying the same thing. A little story, anecdotal. In Nashville, Tennessee, I was visiting. Some of you may know Nitai Gaursunder, who is a medical doctor, lives in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and he has a sangha of people he's been going on for so many years. So Nitai Gaursunder's friend, one of the persons, lived in Nashville. They wanted to host a program, so they were real excited. Sure, I'll come. And they said, can you do a 101 class because these are really new people? I said, sure. And they said, there's going to be 30 families. I said, prepare yourself for the fact that of the 30 families that already committed, maybe 15 of those 30 families will come, and they'll come in time for prasadam. Said, no, 30 families, they're going to come. Sure enough, when the class was beginning, it was just the local families. The regular congregation, not even one. They came, some of them came in time for prasadam. So I sat all the kids in the front, the young kids, and there's a 101 class. So, okay, here's a scenario. I'm going along the path of life, wanting to enjoy, and something happens and it's not enjoyment, and another something happens and it's not enjoyment, and I keep going, and I take another birth, and it's not enjoyment, and I keep going, and at some point in time, a little light goes on and says, you know what? I'm not enjoying. I want to do a U-turn. I want to do a 180 and go back. But it doesn't happen like that. So why when you just make that decision, you want to do a U-turn, it's not that simple. And the kids were giggling and this and that. And then one little girl right in front raised her hand and said, the mind is willing, but the body isn't. I want to enjoy. Okay. Then another boy, he's a little further back. It's a similar thing. He didn't use the word attached, but it's something like that. My determination isn't very strong because I have other things I like to do. Something like that. Well, so a child can understand, but that the children were not about to live a bhakti life very seriously because they're children, they want to play. But they understood, but they're not ready to do. So and then there's big kids, like adults, and they have some understanding, but they're accustomed to not only in this lifetime, many lifetimes, deeply ingrained tendencies, vasanas, and there's a tendency to do something.
So if desires, as you said, that we all know desires are basically the root cause of every trouble human has, I think, more or less. And if these desires are uncontrollable, how do you disconnect yourself?
Well, you have good association and align those desires with that which is wholesome. Keep wholesome association, you can align those desires in a wholesome way. Number one. Sadhu Sangha, good association, wholesome association. I mean, it's just like what you want for your kids. You're concerned that they have wholesome association because a rotten apple can spoil a whole barrel. Bad association can be the beginning of ruination of anyone. Krishna's son became ruined. Boma became Bomasura, the son of Krishna and Bhumi. So then here, sound. Read Srimad Bhagavatam regularly. Read it, if possible, read it aloud. Read it in a group of people that read together. You are starting to read Bhagavad Gita, read together. Just, aloud. And if you sitting in your room, read it aloud. Because that's sound vibration. Even if you don't read it aloud, you read it, in your mind. It's sound vibration impacts desire. And you cumulatively, over a period of time, your desires start to transform. Even if they were deeply ingrained material ones, they start to realign and transform into going upwards, just through sound. So sadhu sangha and bhajana kriya. When you're with sadhus, what do? You do what sadhus do. What's that? Bhajana kriya. And as you do bhajana kriya, what happens? The unwanted, anartha nivritti, unwanted things in the heart become gradually cleansed. It's very simple. Life is complicated, but the bhakti process is quite simple. And it's realigning everything towards the goal. Anyone else? Okay, so let's have Arti for the Bhagavatam, and then we'll move on to the next thing. Yeah, online. Oh, let me guess, Kirti. How many? 4? Oh. Okay.
You explained unmotivated devotional service is not tinged with modes.
Doesn't what?
Is not tinged with modes.
I'm listening.
However, when I engage in devotional service, there seems to be some motivation. How do I move beyond it?
Purification. And strive by right means. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, one who strives by right means is assured of success. So make sure you've got the right means and make sure you're striving, and you'll get there.
The kings were delivered by Krishna from Jarasandha, spoke like pure devotees. How did they become devotees?
How does anyone become a devotee? You become a devotee by associating with devotees. You receive bhakti from one who's carrying bhakti. That's how they became devotees. Now, it doesn't give the information which devotee was that devotee that the kings associated with. Doesn't have that information. But in principle, they associated with devotees. Therefore they took shelter of Krishna, and they sent a messenger to ask Krishna to give them shelter and give them protection, because they were in desperate need. Their lives were in the line. They were going to be made a human sacrifice. So they took shelter of Krishna because they had an association with a devotee somewhere. Next.
Who were the kings in their previous life to have...
Oh, come on. We have there's 20,800 kings, and he wants to know who they were in their previous lives. Next.
How to respond to someone who says Krishna is the cause of my suffering, since he is the cause of all causes. This argument sounds like one is not taking responsibility for one's own actions.
Yeah, you just read the purport that we just read, and you'll have the answer. You'll be able to explain to them. Man proposes, God disposes. It's not like he sitting in a big chair up there somewhere in heaven or in a high place, and he condemns people to suffer when you're trying to be a good person. That's the classic. We're reaping the fruits of our past activities. And those past activities are free will choices. And so you, going forward in time, should make wise choices. But supposing you don't know what a wise choice is, you think something that's not a wise choice is a wise choice. In answer to one of the answers to your friends. You're responsible for your choices. Supposing you're not making wise choices. And as this age progresses, choices are going down. That which is norms going down and down and down. Anything else? He has?
No, it's from
Somebody else. Good. Okay.
From Sanchari.
Okay.
As you were explaining, Jarasandha's reasoning on why he was willing to give anything to a Brahmana, I was thinking that he would be considered a very pious person in Kali Yuga. Even among devotees or aspiring devotees, this mentality sneaks its way in. For example, study well, get a good job, and then you can preach well because people are attracted to wealth and success.
Yeah.
But really, the level of surrender needed to give that wealth in Krishna's service turns so easily into using that wealth in our service.
Yep.
How do we stop ourselves from becoming little Jarasandhas in our devotional life?
It's just purity is the solution. And say it negatively. Without purity, one will be lured by different varieties of material enjoyment. And this variety may look better than that variety, and that variety looks better than another variety, but varieties of material enjoyment are going to be there unless there's purity. And so now how do you get purity? And that was the earlier question. Know what right conduct is, because you're studying the scriptures and you have proper guidance, and you're aspiring in that direction. You associate with the Supreme Pure, you become pure. And the Supreme Pure is the personality of Godhead. So by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, by chanting the holy name, by worshipping the deity form, by serving the devotees of the Lord, these are mentioned specifically in Scripture. These are purifying activities that lead one to purity. And try to do them sincerely. Then comes your question, how do we know what sincerity is? Remember that question? Okay. Thank you very much. Prabhupada ki jai. I'm ready. Just, where's the paraphernalia? Right there? Oh, okay.
So, Sumit Prabhu and Sonia Mataji are welcoming Srimad Bhagavatam to their home. And so Guru Maharaj is going to be performing Aarti to that Srimad Bhagavatam. And people will be singing Kirtan, so the participant will follow the Kirtan. Krishna Prasad Bhutale Shri Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaho Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasad Bhutale Shri Mate Bhakti Vedanta Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine
निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे नास्ते सरस्वती गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Jaya Radha Nila Madhav Radha Nila Madhav Radha Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Ja.